They arrested him for treason at 14 hours on a Tuesday. By 1407, he'd confessed to crimes that wouldn't be committed for another 3 days. The interrogators thought he was insane until Thursday, when every detail he'd described came true, exactly as he'd said it. Then they realized the room wasn't extracting confessions. It was extracting the future. I'm looking at the file now. Folder 2247 PSI4. Classified so far above standard protocols that it doesn't have a normal designation. Just a symbol. A circle with an arrow pointing backward. The pages smell like copper and something else. Something electric, like ozone after a lightning strike. The thumbnail notation is written in 3 different hands, as if multiple people tried to summarize this and gave up. Causality reversal. Subjects know before we ask. Let me tell you about the answer room. It started as an accident in November 1976. KGB headquarters, Lubyanka building, Moscow. They were renovating the interrogation facilities in the basement, replacing old equipment, updating the soundproofing, installing new recording systems. Standard maintenance on Room 7, a space that had been used for routine questioning since the 1950s. The contractor was a man named Volkov. First name redacted, like always. He was drilling into the floor to install new anchor points when his bit hit something that shouldn't have been there. Not pipes, not rebar, something else. From his incident report, drill bit encountered resistance at depth of 1.2 meters. Material unknown. Metallic but non-ferrous. When pressure increased, bit suddenly penetrated through layer with no resistance. Immediately experienced severe headache and temporal disorientation. For approximately 30 seconds, I could see the completed work. Not imagine it, see it. As if I was remembering something that hadn't happened yet. Temporal disorientation. He's describing looking into the future, but he doesn't have the language for it, so he calls it a memory that's backward. Volkov reported the phenomenon. His supervisor dismissed it as fatigue, but ordered the hole sealed anyway and the work relocated to a different section of the floor. The renovation continued without further incident for 3 days. The first interrogation in renovated Room 7 occurred on November 18, 1976. Subject was a low-level dissident named Petrov, arrested for distributing unsanctioned literature. Standard procedure, preliminary questioning, established timeline, extract confession. Interrogator Major Konstantin Yurev sat down across from Petrov at 09 hours. Standard opening, name, occupation, address, building rapport, establishing baseline. But before Yurev could ask his first real question, Petrov spoke. The documents are in the heating vent behind my apartment building, wrapped in plastic. Third vent from the left. I met with the Finnish courier on November 12th at the park bench near Gorky Street. The next meeting was scheduled for December 2nd, but I wasn't going to attend because I knew you were watching. Complete confession. Specific details. Names, dates, locations. All of it unprompted. Yurev's report. Subject appeared confused by his own words. Stated he did not intend to confess. When asked why he revealed this information, subject replied, "I don't know. The words came out before I thought them. I was answering questions you haven't asked yet." Yurev thought Petrov was employing some kind of psychological tactic. Confusion as defense, preemptive confession to control the narrative. So he continued with standard interrogation procedure, asking the questions he'd planned to ask. And Petrov had already answered every single one. Not approximately, not close. Exact answers to exact questions, delivered 10 minutes before the questions were spoken. as if the interrogation was happening in reverse, responses preceding inquiries. By the end of the session, Yurev was unnerved enough to file a formal report with his superiors. The report was skeptical, uncomfortable. He suggested Petrov had somehow obtained the interrogation protocol in advance, memorized the questions, prepared responses. But then they checked the heating vent, third from the left. The documents were there, exactly where Petrov said they'd be. The second case happened 5 days later. Different interrogator, different subject. A suspected black marketeer named Sokolov, brought in for questioning about foreign currency violations. Lieutenant Fedorov conducted this interrogation. He'd read Yurev's report and dismissed it as coincidence or bad procedure. Fedorov was methodical, careful, known for his unpredictable questioning style. He'd deliberately vary his approach to prevent subjects from anticipating his next move. He sat down across from Sokolov at 14:00 hours, opened his notebook, prepared to ask about currency transactions. Sokolov spoke first. "You're going to start with the American dollars, then move to the German marks, then ask about the contact in West Berlin whose name I don't actually know. You'll threaten me with Article 88, but you're bluffing, because you don't have enough evidence for espionage charges." At 14:23, you'll receive a phone call from your superior, asking about the Petrov case, and you'll leave the room for 6 minutes. Fedorov stared at him, asked, "How do you know this?" Sokolov looked terrified. I don't know how I know. The words are just there, in my head, like memories of a conversation we already had, but we haven't had it yet." Fedorov asked his first planned question. "How much American currency did you possess?" And Sokolov said, word for word, the exact answer he'd already given in his preemptive confession. At 14:23, Fedorov's phone rang. After the third case, a woman named Dimitrova, who answered 18 questions before they were asked, and then correctly predicted the interrogator would spill tea on his notes at 11:34, the KGB launched a formal investigation. Not into the subjects, into the room. Major General Andropov himself, yes, that Andropov, future head of the KGB and eventually Soviet premier, ordered a technical assessment of Room 7. The report is fascinating, watching the inspectors try to explain something that shouldn't exist using language designed for rational physics. Room dimensions: 4 meters by 5 meters. Ceiling height 2.8 meters. Standard construction: concrete walls, reinforced floor, acoustic dampening in walls. Recent renovation work exposed subsurface layer at 1.2 meter depth. Material composition unknown. Electromagnetic properties anomalous. That material Volkov had drilled through. They analyzed it, or tried to. Samples resist standard metallurgical testing. Under spectroscopic analysis, material exhibits properties inconsistent with known elements. Crystalline structure appears to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. When observed, material seems to choose which state to manifest. Multiple quantum states. They're describing something that exists in superposition, as if the material itself hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. But here's where the file gets strange. One of the physicists on the assessment team, Dr. Yevgeny Kozlov, added a personal note to his report. The material is not producing the temporal effect. The material is reflecting it. Something beneath this layer, something we did not fully penetrate, is generating a field that interacts with conscious observation. The field appears to collapse future probability states into present information. In plain language, there was something under Lubyanka that was pulling the future into the present, making it accessible to human consciousness like a memory that hadn't happened yet. They should have sealed the room immediately. Instead, they decided to use it. The classified directive came down in December 1976. Room 7 is to be redesignated as a special interrogation facility. Access restricted to Level 5 clearance and above. All sessions to be recorded and analyzed by dedicated research team. Subjects are to be selected based on strategic intelligence value. They turned it into a weapon. A way to extract not just what prisoners knew, but what they would know. What they would do. What they would become. The next 6 months are documented in excruciating detail. Interrogation after interrogation, each one following the same impossible pattern. Subjects answering questions before they were asked, describing events that hadn't happened yet, confessing to crimes not yet committed. But the phenomenon was evolving. At first, subjects could only anticipate questions minutes in advance. 10 minutes, maybe 15. But by March 1977, subjects were answering questions an hour before they were asked. By June, 3 hours. The temporal window was expanding, and the subjects were changing. Dr. Irina Volkova, assigned as the facility's psychiatric consultant, filed regular assessments. I'm reading her notes from April 1977. Subject 34 completed interrogation at 16 hours. Remained in observation cell for post-session monitoring. At 19:30, subject began speaking answers to questions that had not yet been formulated. When questioned about this behavior, subject stated, "The room is still asking. I can still hear it asking even though I left. The questions echo forward in time, and I'm standing in the echo." The effect was persisting. Subjects who'd been in room 7 maintained the ability to perceive future queries even after leaving, as if the room had rewired something fundamental in their consciousness. By August, subject 34 was answering questions a full day in advance. By September, 3 days. And then they made the mistake of bringing in someone important. Colonel Grigory Volkov, no relation to the contractor, was arrested on October 12, 1977, suspected of passing classified documents to British intelligence. High-value target, critical interrogation. They wanted everything: contacts, methods, compromised materials, future operations. They put him in room 7. Senior interrogator Major Yuri Petrov, no relation to the earlier subject, began the session at 10 hours. Standard protocol, but with Volkov, they planned a marathon interrogation. 6 hours, systematic extraction of every detail. Volkov started talking immediately, not answering questions, just talking. A steady stream of information that went on for 47 minutes without pause. Names, dates, dead drops, encryption methods, operational procedures spanning 3 years of espionage activity. Then he said, "You're going to ask me about the documents I haven't stolen yet. The ones I was planning to take in December. Submarine deployment schedules for the Northern Fleet. I was going to photograph them on December 18th and pass them to my contact on December 22nd at the usual location. Crimes that hadn't happened yet. Treason in the future, tense." Petrov made a note, planning to return to this later in the interrogation. But Volkov kept going. In January, I was going to recruit Lieutenant Sokolov from Naval Intelligence. In February, I was going to establish a second courier route through Helsinki. In March, he described 18 months of espionage operations that existed only as intentions, as plans, as probabilities not yet collapsed into action. Then he stopped. looked at Petrov with eyes that had gone distant, unfocused. "I can see you asking me about this in 2 days. And in that interrogation, the one we're having on Thursday, you'll ask about my wife, whether she knew, and I'll tell you she didn't, but you won't believe me. And on Friday, you'll arrest her anyway and bring her to this room, and she'll answer questions about my activities before you ask them. And she'll describe things I haven't told her because I never got the chance because you arrested me first." The temporal window had jumped. Volkov wasn't just answering today's questions. He was answering Thursday's questions and describing Friday's interrogation of his wife, an interrogation that hadn't been planned yet. Petrov asked, "How far ahead can you see?" Volkov's response is typed in the transcript, but there's a handwritten note in the margin saying the recording captured something the transcript couldn't convey, a quality of voice that sounded hollow, as if speaking from a distance. All of it. I can see all the questions you'll ever ask me. Every interrogation, every session, stretching forward like a corridor with no end. I can see myself answering the same questions over and over, giving you information about events that haven't happened, watching you use that information to prevent the events, which changes the questions, which changes my answers, which changes what happens. It's a loop. The room put me in a loop. They pulled Volkov out of room 7 at 12:47 hours. Emergency psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Volkova's assessment. Subject is experiencing acute temporal disorientation. Maintains he can perceive multiple future timelines simultaneously. Describes sensation of existing in all of them at once, answering questions in all of them while also being here. Recommend immediate suspension of enhanced interrogation protocols pending further study. But here's what made them seal the room. Volkov's predictions started coming true. On October 14th, 2 days after his interrogation, exactly when he said it would happen, the interrogation he'd described occurred. Petrov asked about Volkov's wife. Word for word, the questions Volkov had already answered. On October 15th, they arrested Mrs. Volkova, brought her to room 7 for questioning. She described her husband's activities before anyone asked, gave details about meetings and contacts she couldn't possibly know. And then she said, "You're going to ask me if I helped him. I didn't. But next week you'll find evidence that suggests I did. A letter that will appear in my apartment between now and then, placed there by someone who wants you to believe I was complicit. You'll ask me about this letter on October 23rd at 14:30 hours. And I'm telling you now, I didn't write it. It doesn't exist yet, but it will." The letter appeared on October 21st, exactly as she described, in her apartment, placed there by they never determined by whom. On October 23rd at 14:30 hours, they questioned her about it. She'd already answered. The shutdown order came from Andropov himself on October 28, 1977. Special Interrogation Facility Room 7 is to be immediately decommissioned. All ongoing cases to be transferred to standard facilities. Room is to be sealed and designated restricted access pending further investigation into anomalous temporal effects. All personnel involved in Room 7 operations to undergo psychological evaluation and monitoring. They welded the door shut, posted guards, reclassified the entire wing of the basement as structurally unsound and scheduled for demolition. But they never demolished it. The file contains architectural surveys from 1978, 1982, 1987, each one noting that Room 7 remains sealed, but the surrounding structure is stable, as if they couldn't bring themselves to destroy it, but couldn't risk opening it either. The aftermath is documented in psychiatric reports spanning years. Of the 47 subjects interrogated in Room 7, 33 developed what Dr. Volkova called chronic precognitive response syndrome. They continued answering questions no one was asking. They'd be sitting in their cells or walking in exercise yards or eating meals, and suddenly they'd start speaking. Detailed answers to specific questions delivered to empty air. Subject 19, a minor intelligence operative. Observed standing in cell at 03 hours, speaking to wall. When guards intervened, subject stated, "I'm answering tomorrow's questions. Someone will ask me tomorrow about the dead drop location, and I'm answering now because the answer wants to be said." It's pushing forward in time, demanding to exist before the question. The answers were trying to escape. Precognition as a compulsion, information from the future, forcing its way into the present whether anyone was there to receive it or not. By 1980, 6 of the affected subjects had died. Not from illness, not from violence, but from what the medical reports describe as temporal exhaustion. They simply stopped. Hearts stopped beating, lungs stopped breathing, brain activity ceased, as if they'd expended all their future and had no more time left to live. Dr. Volkova's final report, dated March 1981. The survivors describe existence as increasingly non-linear. They experience memories of events before the events occur. They answer questions in dreams that are asked days later. Several report living backward, perceiving effects before causes, results before actions. Subject 22 stated, "I'm becoming unstuck in time. The room unstuck me and I can't find my way back to the present." Colonel Volkov, the original high-value subject, lasted the longest. He was kept in isolation, monitored constantly, studied by teams of psychiatrists and physicists trying to understand what the room had done to him. His final interview is dated June 1983, nearly 6 years after his interrogation. The transcript is difficult to read. His responses don't correspond to the questions. He's answering queries that haven't been asked yet, or were asked yesterday, or will be asked next week. The conversation has no linear structure, but near the end, the interviewer asked him, "Can you describe what you perceive right now?" Volkov's response, "I'm everywhere in my timeline simultaneously. I can see my birth and my death and every moment between them, all happening at once. I'm answering this question, but I'm also answering the questions you'll ask tomorrow and the ones you asked yesterday. Time isn't a line anymore. It's a space, and I'm spread across all of it, too thin to exist properly in any single moment. Can you see how this ends? Yes. How does it end? With me answering this question. With me telling you how it ends. With me saying these words that I've already said and will say again, and am always saying. The room made me eternal by making me impossible. I exist in all moments of my interrogation forever, answering questions that never stop being asked because time is a loop and I'm trapped in the questioning." Colonel Volkov died 3 days later. Heart failure, officially. But the autopsy noted something unusual. His brain tissue showed signs of temporal fragmentation, cellular structures existing in multiple states of decay simultaneously, as if different parts of his brain were aging at different rates. As if parts of him had already died while other parts were still being born. The file contains one more document. A research proposal from 1991, after the Soviet Union collapsed, and certain classified projects were being reassessed. A team of physicists wanted to reopen Room 7, study it properly with modern equipment, understand the mechanism behind the temporal effect. They argued that the technology, if it could be called that, represented a breakthrough in consciousness research, quantum mechanics, perhaps even time travel. The proposal was denied, not by the Russian government, but by something called the Temporal Oversight Committee, an organization I can find no other reference to anywhere in the archives. The denial letter is brief. Room 7 is to remain sealed indefinitely. The temporal anomaly it contains is not a technology to be studied, but a hazard to be contained. Opening the room risks expanding the effect beyond the current containment zone. The question-answer causality reversal is stable only because it is isolated. Exposure to modern interrogation techniques, digital recording, networked computer systems could allow the anomaly to propagate through information networks, creating cascading temporal paradoxes. In other words, opening Room 7 in the age of the Internet might let the effect spread, might create a world where everyone answers questions before they're asked, where the future bleeds into the present through every screen and speaker and search query, where interrogation becomes perpetual, and we're all subjects in a room that never stops asking. There's a handwritten note on the back of that denial letter. No signature, but the handwriting matches Andropov's from earlier documents. I was there the day they sealed it. I stood outside Room 7 with my hand on the door, and I could hear something. Not voices, but questions. Thousands of them. Millions. All the questions that would ever be asked in that room, layered on top of each other, demanding answers that hadn't been thought yet. And underneath the questions, I heard answers, my own voice, responding to inquiries I hadn't formulated. I heard myself confessing to things I hadn't done, describing futures I would never live to see, answering questions about my death, my successor, the fall of the Soviet Union, events decades away, but already being interrogated in that room. The room doesn't just reverse causality for subjects, it reverses it for everyone who enters, everyone who asks. We're all subjects in Room 7. We just haven't been arrested yet. I'm sealing the file now, putting it back in its special container, not a folder, but a lid-lined box that blocks something. Electromagnetic radiation, supposedly. But I think it's more than that. Room 7 is still sealed in the basement of Lubyanka. Still locked, still guarded, still designated as structurally unsound after 47 years. They've built offices above it, renovated the surrounding areas, modernized the entire building. But they never touch that room. And sometimes, according to security reports that officially don't exist, guards hear voices from behind the sealed door. Answers to questions no one's asking. Confessions to crimes not yet committed. Future interrogations happening in the past, echoing forward through decades of sealed darkness. The room is still asking. And somewhere in time, past or future, it doesn't matter anymore. Someone is still answering. I wonder what questions it's asking now. I wonder what answers it's extracting from the future, pulling them backward through time, storing them in that space where causality runs in reverse. I wonder if one of those answers is mine. If somewhere in the temporal loop of Room 7, I'm already confessing to the crime of opening this file, answering questions about what I found here before anyone thinks to ask, before I think to ask myself. As I close the lead-lined box, I notice I've written something on my notepad, right there at the bottom of the page, in my own handwriting, but I don't remember writing it. You're going to ask yourself if this is real. You're going to wonder if the file is genuine, or if the answer room is just a story. And I'm telling you now, before you ask, the answer is both. It's real because you're reading about it. And you're reading about it because it's real. The room doesn't care about the direction of time. Neither do the questions. I didn't write that. I couldn't have. But it's there in my hand, in my writing, answering a question I was just about to think. The box is sealed, the file is stored, but I can still hear it. The faintest whisper of a question I haven't asked yet. This is Red Archive Stories. I'm Ian Cartwell. Some rooms contain prisoners. Some rooms contain answers. And some rooms contain the question you haven't thought of yet. But you will.